You want your hat on or off?
No, my head might shine. I don't know. My head. I look all right. I'm all right, man. I want to be comfortable.
You comfortable, okay.
Okay.
All right, quiet on set. And 3, 2.
Good day, sir.
Good evening.
Could you tell us your name, your birth year, and who you are?
My name is Reverend Curtis Johnson. I'm the president of the Mooresville South Idale NAACP. I was born in 1953
Here in Mooresville?
here in Mooresville.
What do you remember about Mooresville growing up?
Oh, well, there's quite a bit to try to remember about growing up in Mooresville. I remember being young and living on Cheryl Street, which was a main street, and which was not only community, but it was a community instead of a neighborhood. There's a lot of difference between a community and a neighborhood, and that neighborhood at that particular time had businesses, black businesses, school, churches, and so to me that was considered a neighborhood and not a community. And all of the blacks that lived in the community seemed like every one of them was doing something positive. I don't know of any in that neighborhood that was renting. Pretty much most of everybody in there was buying their own homes.
What are some of the black businesses that you recall?
I remember the 4-6 Diner. I remember Pipes, Pure Oil, when he first got started. I remember Jim Frank's Cafe, and then there was one guy, Mr. Revi, that had a store. Him and Mr. Louis Stouch had a store with the old dirt floor. And I remember we would go in there and move around. And then there were some blacks that had mules or horses that you would call. They went around and plied gardens and things of this nature. And some of them just did odds and ends. Some hauled pulpwood. Mr. Wilson, I remember him. He had his own business with pulpwood, and I remember Mr. Revi. I think that was his last name. He hauled cardboard, and so to me, they was all doing pretty good and doing very well in the community.
Do you remember anything about Reverend McKenzie? He was also a president.
Oh, wow. I remember a lot about Reverend McKenzie, especially when, I was in the 6th grade and he used to come in and substitute teach. And to me, Reverend McKenzie was one minister in this town of Mooresville that seemed to have, he had some of the major churches had them all working together, and I thought that was a beautiful thing. And it's something about Reverend McKenzie now that's in my spirit. They're saying that we need to name a scholarship after Reverend McKenzie because he did such a great things. Because I remember him working tremendously with the NAACP. I remember that during the summer, a few of the churches would get together and go off on, they called them Sunday school picnics, but I don't like to use that word picnic anymore because I know what the meaning of it means. So, because to me, I'm going to go ahead and say it, picnic means that you pick a nigger, and that's what they use for their entertainment. A lot of whites did. They used it to go out and have their little rendezvous and their little things of this nature, but it was called pick a nigger, and they would pick that nigger for that nigger to be their entertainment. So that was quite the reason why I don't like to use the word picnic. But we would go to Shelby, High Point, Morganton, and the reason why that all of the churches would get together with Mr. Gabriel's buses. And I remember Mr. Gabriel's buses, green and yellow buses, and we would all get on the buses, all the kids would get on the buses, and we would head out for that Saturday. And the parents would would follow the buses. Either the parents would come on over later. But that particular Saturday when they had the Sunday school picnic, pretty much all minorities was out of Mooresville. Mooresville was kind of vacant with minorities during that time. But it was a good time. And Reverend McKenzie, he seen where there was a need for us to do that, because at that particular time, the War Memorial here in Mooresville, they would not allow minorities to swim over there. So Reverend McKenzie took us other places to where we could enjoy ourselves as kids.
What role did the NAACP play in integrating Mooresville?
Well, now I don't know exactly what role the NAACP played, but I'm pretty sure that the NAACP played a very important role, because the NAACP was, Mooresville received a charter in 1935. And in 1935, there were a lot going on. That was during the Great Depression, right there towards the end of the Great Depression. I know that minorities were suffering with jobs, housing. A lot of things was going on. They would be the last hired and the first fired on jobs. And so I'm sure that our ancestors, when they started the NAACP here in Mooresville, something had to be going on.
As the NAACP president now, is there a particular motivational moment that you had growing up here in Mooresville, or just in your experience as a Black man, that keeps you in this work?
When I was small, I can remember my grandmother telling me that I was either going to be a minister or a lawyer, because I was always one that wanted to see things grow. And I always felt that me, myself, if everybody else go in front, I'll catch up. I'll play catch up. I remember the Elks Home, when the Elks Home was here in Mooresville. When I was small, I always wanted to be in the Elks. But by the time I got old enough, they closed it down. When I was younger, they had the American Legion post here. And I always wanted to be a part of that, which I did go in the military and come out, and I was a part of that. The Dunbar alumni was here, and they still have it, but it's not doing anything. And what gets me is that it seemed like Mooresville always had a dark cloud over it, always had a dark cloud. And I could never understand why minorities couldn't work together, couldn't get along together, why we couldn't strive and achieve great things. In the last few years, I have really been searching to try to find out why there's so much division amongst us. And I visit many churches here, and a lot of the churches here, small churches. But that's what keeps me going. As the president of the NAACP, I've gone to other churches out of town, and while I'm there, and I see them doing such a great work, that it hurts me on the inside to say why this work is not being done in Mooresville. And so I've been praying for God to bring a church in Mooresville, one church where we all could come together and all work together, where we could all have our own gymnasium, where we could all have our own fellowship hall, where we could rent the place out, where we don't have to keep running to the whites to put on banquets and things of this nature. So that's one thing that keeps me going in Mooresville. Somebody's got to do it.
Have you found any enlightening thing that you feel, you said you've been searching for the reason why there's division. Have you found that reason? Or any reason?
No, I really haven't, but I can say that I see where there's a whole lot of chiefs and not enough Indians, as the old saying would say. We have so many here that wants to do their own thing instead of trying to work and come together. And I feel that if we could just all work together and build one massive congregation, one massive church. And I think what's a lot of people is failing to realize that here in Mooresville, the 2002 census said that we only had 36, a little over 3,600 votes, minority in Mooresville. And 1,500 is males, and 1,600 is females. So I think that that's where a lot of pastors that are coming into Mooresville is failing to do their homework. They're failing to really search out the market and try to see how can we put this thing together. So I think that if we would just start looking more at demographics, looking more at the structure of Mooresville, then we could figure this thing out and do away with so much division amongst ourselves.
I agree. You are also a businessman yourself. Are looking back at some of the black businesses here in Mooresville growing up, are there any moments that influenced you to start your own business or to become a businessman?
There are a lot, because I've always been one of those person that I'm not fearful to try anything. I was probably one of the youngest blacks in Mooresville to ever drive tractor and trailer. I got out of Volkswagen and got in a tractor and trailer and drove it just by listening to the sounds. When I was working with my grandfather doing construction work, they had a bulldozer out there. And I decided one Saturday to go out there and get on that bulldozer and drove it, cranked it up and drove it. I was on another construction job coming up. They had a crane. And I learned how to operate the crane, bulldozer, the crane, the boom, the winch, the whole 9 yards. I learned to do concrete work. I learned to lay brick. I learned how to do carpentry. I learned how to do everything by just watching and listening. And then I never forget that I was on this one job, and I started working with Westinghouse Elevator. And they always gave the blacks, well, I was the only black that was there in Charlotte, and they'd always give me the nasty jobs. You clean out the pit, you clean out this where trash and everything was at. And I'd been with Westinghouse for about 4 months, and as I was standing on the platform, elevator platform, I heard 2 white guys standing up there, and they said, I don't know why they even hired him. I ain't never seen a nigga can put in an elevator. And I said within myself, I said, well, you're gonna see one now. And they say it took 5 years to learn how to put in an elevator. In a year and a half, I was installing hydraulic elevators, and 2 of the same guys that they sent over to work with me, one of them quit and one of them left and went to another company because they seen the nigga put in the elevator. Out of all of that what pushed me to start my own business with doing screen printing. And I will never forget that I bought the equipment and set it in the garage. And it had been sitting in the garage, I guess, 6 months. And I went to my sister's church one Sunday, and the pastor prophesied, and he said, "You got some equipment sitting in your garage that you never worked with." And sure enough, it was there, because I didn't know nothing about screen printing. I went home, opened up everything, set everything up, and started screen printing. That's been 20 years ago. I did some work with Sears when I was doing elevators, and they says, "Man, you'd be good doing Sears window treatment." So I started a business there I was doing all of Sears' window treatments and things. But I've always said that there's jobs out there for these young people. There's always opportunities. It don't matter what it is. You can find something that you can do for yourself, something you can do. Like right now, if my vision wasn't bad, I'd probably be doing what you guys are doing now, doing documentary films, because I done fell in love with it.
When and why did you join the NAACP?
I joined the NAACP. I guess I've been a member of the NAACP now probably over 40 years, because I've been in the Masonics. I've been in the Masons 42 years. And then I joined the Consistory. And then I joined the Shriners. And I joined the NAACP right after I got involved with the Masons, because this was one of our requirements to be a member. And I've always been one that I feel like injustice is a plural word. What may be injustice to you may not be injustice to me, and what may be injustice to me may not be to you. And sometimes when we speak out about injustice, a lot of times that first thing that someone will holler is, "You being racist." No, not being racist. I go back and look back at where my grandparents come from. I remember working as a small young man with my grandfather out in the fields. And during that time, he was even scared to they wouldn't even put money in the bank, because they knew what could happen. It had happened to some before, and they just reach in the bank and take your money. I've seen my grandfather when he sharecropped and worked with a couple other in the community, and they would call him Henry, and he was older than they were. They called him Henry up until he got so old, then they started calling him Uncle Hunkle, because they wouldn't put a title to his name. And I used to ask him, "Bobby Henry, why are you letting that man call you Uncle Hunkle?" And he would always say, "Hush, boy, hush." And to me, being a member of the NAACP and what we came up through, it was a must. To me, it was a must. Because even a kid knows when they're being treated wrong. They know when it's born in us to know this. And the NAACP, to me, gave us a door, gave us a platform, it gave us a door to voice our opinion, to be a part of this society and not be a second-class citizen.
And why is voting important to you?
Voting is very important to me. And I'll tell you why. I believe that if there's anything that could hurt me more, is to take a vote away from me. That is personal, very personal. There's nothing could get me more upset more than anything is when you try to take a vote away from me. I was in a church, and the church took a vote. And right after the vote was cast, right after the vote was taken, it wasn't 20 minutes later, the minister decided he would change it and do something else. Ooh, that didn't sit well with me. And the reason why it didn't sit well with me, because there were young kids sitting in there. And you see young kids right to the day, they'll say, my vote don't count. And the reason why they say that my vote don't count because of what took place that particular day, that evening at church. They voted and then turned around and said, oh, we just scratch that, we'll do it another way. And so when I see these type of things happening, yes, it really bothers me. It really bothers me because I know what's behind now when I hear minorities say, especially young minorities, my vote don't count. Because they've seen it happen too many times in too many settings.
And when Martin Luther King Jr. died, how did that make you feel, and what was your involvement?
When Martin Luther King died, that was a hurting feeling that particular day when he was killed. That was a hurting feeling. Because we felt at that particular time that he was a voice for us. He was a powerful voice for us. And when they took him, I had my personal feelings was, who is going to do this now? Who do we have that's going to lead us now? It was a hurting feeling. It was a hurting feeling. And I never forget that right after he was killed, that Preacher Mike, they called him Preacher Mike at that time, him and Lamont Houston, they started a march protesting. It was nonviolent, but we was all over the town. And I never forget that night when we was out there. Streets was bare, no cars moving about. Every once in a while you'd see a car come past. But we was out there because that was a hurting feeling. And I don't know, maybe it could have gotten violent, and it probably would have if somebody had provoked us at that particular time, because that's just how we felt. It was hurting.
We have interviewed folks who said that churches used to be places of refuge, specifically Reed Memorial. Do you recall the times in which that was necessary? Are there any stories of policing that you remember growing up here in Mooresville? Or was everything generally okay?
When I was growing up, yes, there was some incidents with some of the police. I ain't gonna say all of them, but we had some that was pretty racist. I remember when I was young, we would come to Mooresville, and you could count on getting stopped with the police if you was in Mooresville after midnight at night. You was definitely gonna get stopped. And I remember sometimes we would come through and ride through and just take a back street just to have the police to chase after us, and they couldn't find us. And yeah, there was a lot going on back then. But like I said, all of them wasn't bad, but we did have some that was pretty bad. I was just glad to see when Tommy Cross, which was a black officer, when he came on the force, Richard Hall, when he came on the force, it kind of changed things a little bit to see some of the blacks that started to come on, and then there was some of them on the police force that was pretty rough. I'll leave it back there.
Was Damon Williams, was he the first African-American chief in Mooresville?
He was the first Afro-American chief to come to Mooresville. and I thought I thought a lot of Damon. He was one that was working in the community. He was working, with all races of people, especially with minorities, and the minorities was really starting to really feel his presence here. And then all of a sudden, we don't know what happened, but we kind of know what happened. But next thing you know, he was gone. And since he left, he has done well for himself, because as of now, 2022, he's over all of the chiefs of police in the state of North Carolina.
And what did the NAACP do when he was removed from his position?
Well, we had press conferences. We kind of aired out a lot of laundry that they had covered up, or tried to cover it up. But we did everything in our power to see that he was treated fair, in which we feel that he was treated fair. A lot of things that, conversations that we had, can't air him out because he was kind of under a gag order. So, but I think that when he left Mooresville, I think he left in pretty good. That's all I'll say.
And do you think law enforcement in Mooresville has changed for the good or bad?
Well, I would say that a front can be put up anywhere. You can put up a front anywhere. And I believe that right now we're dealing with the front that's being put up that seem to think that things are better. But to look at the staff, there's still room for improvement. From my understanding, when Williams was here, he had, I think it was 100 and some officers, and he hired, I think, a handful, and some of them said that he was hiring too many minorities. So that lets you know that there's still room for improvement. We can't drop our guards. I'm one to know now that you just don't believe everything that you hear, and you definitely don't believe everything that you see.
Let's take a break for a minute. Three, two.
What do you recall, or what would you say is the most pressing, or not pressing, but the most impactful work that the NAACP has done at a local level in Mooresville, just over the course of the last almost 100 years?
I would say that over that period of time, some of the most impactful things that the NAACP has done is made themselves available. Not only have they made themselves available, but now they're starting to speak out more. Since in the 88 years, the NAACP have had in Mooresville right at close to 1,000 members. Now, some of them is deceased and moved and went different places, but over the course of the years, there's been over close to 1,000 members that has joined this branch. And I think that a lot of people have a misunderstanding of the NAACP because they don't really fully understand what the NAACP is actually all about. Some of them seem to think that it's a racist organization, which it's not. We look and take care of all races, everybody. And a lot of people don't understand that it was whites that came together to help W. Du Bois and those guys to form the NAACP. So whites are getting involved now, and to me, that's been one of the most impactful moments since the NAACP's been. Let me tell you something. I know. Sorry for that. I thought I'd cut that thing off. But, you know, there again, the NAACP is definitely making people aware of what some of the things that is still plaguing the black community today. One is like, you know, when you talk about plantations, to the whites, plantation is okay because they see the big house, the White House. They see all of the glamour. They see all of the fame that comes with a plantation. But when you mention plantation to minorities, it's pain, it's sorrow, it's suffering. Here in Mooresville, we have a lot of, you know, communities. Everybody can do what they want to do on their own property and their communities. I mean, we have plantation here. But I do believe that Morrison Plantation Parkway should be renamed. I do believe that.
What do you remember about healthcare, or how has healthcare changed over the course of years in Mooresville?
Well, I will say that back when I was small, my grandmother always had remedies that they would go out and get for various things. Because I guess they just didn't, at that particular time, they just didn't trust doctors because they feel that doctors was experimenting on them, which they was, and go back to the smallpox and all this history, and the reason why that a lot of people was so hesitant about getting the vaccines and things at this day, getting the vaccines now. I remember when, and this is very personal to me, I remember when my sister Phyllis, my mom and dad told us when Phyllis was 2 years old, she got sick. And when she got sick, my mom carried her to the doctor, to the hospital. And while she was there in the hospital, while the doctor was kindly, you know, saying that we'll get arrested and get a room for her, well, my mom said, well, I got to go pick up my husband. So she left to go pick up my dad. And when she got back, the doctor took it upon himself to give her a spinal tap. And that spinal tap caused her to go blind. She didn't walk anymore until she was, right before she passed, she was in her 60s. And she never talked again. And there was nothing that my dad, my mom could do. They tried to. My dad was in the Navy at that time. He tried to get Navy doctors, Navy JAGs, lawyers, and everybody else to see what could be done about it. And nobody would touch it. Nobody would touch it. Messed her up at 2 years old, and she was like that the rest of her life. And I could see why back then some of the parents and was a little skeptical about doctors and them experimenting on minorities.
And what about insurance? We've heard from quite a few people about African Americans and the insurance business. How did that affect your family?
Say that again now.
Well, we talk about African Americans having insurance. How did it affect your family?
Well, at that time, when you're talking about with my sister doing this, just in general. Well, at that time, there was a lot of jobs that my parents had that they didn't have insurance. Like my mom was doing domestic work, so she didn't have any insurance. And then my dad, at that time, he was in the military, but he got out. But then when he got out, he was working like construction jobs and things of this nature. So a lot of them didn't have insurance. So I can't hardly remember ever going to a doctor unless it was going to get my shots to start the school. And I think that those was mandatory, and I think that the health department kind of took care of things like that. But a lot of people at that time, especially minorities, they just didn't have any insurance because of the jobs that their parents was working.
How have Black communities changed over the years? Do you feel like we still have Black communities in Mooresville?
I feel like that we have lost a lot in the process of making this documentary. I see where minorities, they stood together. They came together as communities back years ago, and how when they would butcher their cattle and their hogs and things of this nature, how all the families came together, and then they would sell meat to each other, and there was sharecropping and things of this nature. But now everybody's so busy that it's hard to get them to come together now. It's hard. There's a difference. There's a difference. And my thing is that if they could only see the power that could be done, if they could just come together, the power. But now everybody's going their own directions. Everybody's doing their own thing now. You've heard me talk about the dinner table. You got families that don't even sit down at the dinner table anymore and eat. Everybody's busy eating certain times. And if they would just only think about how much power was at the dinner table, that you could talk to that kid, or you could talk to someone and ask them how their day went and what took place and things of this nature. I remember my grandson came to live with us. He didn't want nothing to do with school when he first came with us. And then after a number of years, and when he got to the 12th grade, he already had the college picked out. He already knew everything he wanted to do, had everything laid out. And people asked me, how did you turn him around? And I said, the dinner table. At the dinner table.
Let's go back to Dunbar a bit. You graduated from Dunbar, correct?
No.
But you did go to Dunbar?
Yeah, I went to Dunbar.
What are some of the things that you feel haven't been listed yet about Dunbar? What are the things that you remember?
Well, what I remember about Dunbar, I remember that there was a lot of talent at Dunbar that never got displayed. We had talent in basketball, we had talent in football, We had talent in baseball because a lot of the minorities in Mooresville played baseball and sports. We had a lot of talent in golf that if Dunbar had been teaching golf, I feel like some of them would have went to the pros. But Mr. Woods was there as principal, and I think that's all he was just there. I don't think that he did everything that he could do to try to help us to move forward. I can remember in the 6th grade, Miss Brown's class, I used to get so frustrated. You know, when you get to 6th grade, that's a serious grade and age. And every time we get ready to read a book, we all had to, 2 or 3 of us had to kind of huddle up together. My page didn't have it, somebody else's page had it, and you sitting there going back and forth from one page to the next and looking and trying to, that was frustrating for me. Now it might not have been for some people, but it was just frustrating for me because, you know, I feel like I want my own book. I want my own, you know, but we just didn't have it. And so I think that did a lot of damage when we integrated into the white schools because of what we had to learn and what we was dealing with while we was there in school. And then when we got over to the white schools and integrated, we was just behind. We was way behind. And then some of them, they wasn't interested in how far behind you was. They didn't care. They wanted some of you out of school day one when you stepped on the ground. I remember Miss Nanny, principal, the first year when we was integrated, and him and a few others, they would stand in the halls just to see who was going to be late going from one class to the next. And the bell rang, you get 5 minutes. We wasn't used to that at Dunbar. And then sometimes you may have to stop and use the bathroom. But they didn't care. You would tell them they didn't care. They were ready. It was hard making that transition. It was hard. And coming from Dunbar and being so far behind with books and things of this nature. We had good teachers. We had excellent teachers, good teachers, smart teachers. But they just couldn't get us ready enough, prepared enough to go into that next transition.
Overall, as the president of the NAACP, as a native of Mooresville, what do you feel needs to be remembered about Black Mooresville?
I'm hoping that this documentary will teach and educate. Educate some and teach the others. And show that there's still a need and that there's still growth to be had on our behalf. But it's up to us. It's up to us to come together and make it happen. When I was potentate in the Shriners, illustrious potentate in the Shriners in Lexington, our deputy wanted us to, all the shrine temples in the state of North Carolina, to display the city flag that we were, the town we were in, they wanted to display the city flag. Well, at that time, Lexington did not have a city flag. And so Sylvester Davis, which was an employee with the city of Lexington, he got together and we had a guy to draw the design out. And he gave the design to the town of Lexington. And the mayor at the time was Ben, I can't remember his last name. So the town went back and forth, and so the town allowed us, Alcatab, I was potentate at that time, to design the first city flag for the city of Blackstone. They put it in a gold frame, they put the plaque underneath there and everything, and I went over there a few weeks ago to see the flag, and they done moved the flag. Nobody knows where the flag's at. And I says, wow, we asked for, they want us to make history, but then they turn around and destroy our history from us. But we still have the original flag that was designed there at Alcatab Shrine Temple. They are trying to find that flag now. But I say to Mooresville, to all of the young people, opportunities are out here. Opportunities are here. It's up to us to make a legacy. It's up to us. It's up to us.
Do you feel like Mooresville's legacy is nicely encompassed in the legacies of Selma Burke and Principal Woods and those who have been Winnie Hooper? Or do you feel that this is necessary for more to be lifted? Other names that should have been lifted need to be lifted now.
I ain't gonna say when I'm gonna say when we started this project, I was told that we didn't have any Black history here in Mooresville. And I was also told that what we can do is start with y'all's history in 2022. And I said, no, we have history here in Mooresville. With Miss Winnie Hooper, with Pike, and with so many of the others, Obie Stevenson, even June Shepard, he had a little thing going too. Nobody mentioned him, but he had a little thing going as well. With Joe Byers, I about forgot what you was asking me now, man. I'm trying to, what were you saying?
Well, you're on a roll. The names that you feel that need to be lifted.
Okay. You're talking Joe Byers, and you're talking Randy McDowell, the Caldwell family, the Kaysen family, the Burtons, I think was their name. The Corners, Miss Macy Caldwell, they always had a baseball team, they was in a lot of sports and things. There's a lot of people here in Mooresville that, Napoleon Lowry, which everybody knows him now for what he does at the school and what he did at the school. So a lot of kids remember him, but there's many more. I know that if we could have started this 20 years ago, we could probably get more names and everything of what we have now, but there's a lot of history in Mooresville.
So you had mentioned voting. Back in the day, Democrats used to win elections in Ardell County. Currently, and for the last at least 20 years, Democrats have not had a chance. How does that make you feel?
It kind of, I don't know who all has moved here, so it lets you know that somebody's teaching somebody something in their home. And I will say that racism is not born, it's taught. So right now in Ardell County, yeah, it's definitely a red county. It's hard for Democrats to even come close to trying to win a seat. Most of The ones that are Democrats now, they register as Republican, and so that they can get on board. I don't know what it would take to change that. I do know what would take to change that if they keep building like they're building, because Mooresville, in 1935, Mooresville only had a population of like 4,000 or something, not quite 5,000 people, and right now, Mooresville's population is sitting at right at about 54,000. And I know what can change it if they keep building houses and bringing people in from up north and around different places, and I'm hoping that a lot of them come in are Democrats, so that's a good way of changing it.
And why do black people become Democrats?
Well, there's a lot involved there with why blacks become Democrats, and I hate to even get off into politics, but I will say this. From what the Democrats are showing now versus what the other party's showing, I can see a great need, and I can see why they are running to the Democratic Party, because I'm going to tell you, if the Democrats was acting anywhere like the other party was acting, I would probably be going over there myself. But to see such a rainbow, I won't say a rainbow, but to see such a race of people come together, all different nationalities coming together in the Democratic Party, and then seeing so many minorities moving ahead, and, vice president, president, Attorney General Eric Holder, and all those guys, to see some of the position and things that they are holding, and then their concerns. I would say the Democratic Party's concerns are more or less lines up with what I believe and what I feel as far as a minority.
Do you feel that you have anything left to share about Black Mooresville, that you're concerned that it's being left behind?
I'm hoping that everyone that sees this documentary, I'm hoping that it will do something, that it will inspire you to reach out to each other, to one another, to try to bridge this gap that's been spread far too long. This bridge that we are trying to cross now, we should have crossed it years ago. We should have crossed it years ago. Everybody's not bad. All races are not bad. But we have some bad ones in all. Hopefully this will bring Mooresville together. That what we all can do, as Martin Luther King, where we can all walk down the road and sing together in harmony. This is what I'm hoping. That this documentary will bring harmony into our communities.